Hello friends, welcome to Daily News Analysis on The Hindu by Daily Shots. In this video, we are going to deal with topics from editorial, international and business pages on UPSC and TNPC perspective, and other relevant articles are explained and shared in the below description box in the format of a PDF, and the relevant timestamping had been provided to navigate to the relevant news article directly. So now let's go into the session. The trends shaping the post COVID 19 world. This article explains how various countries are responding to the current prevailing economic recession, which is to be moved under depression because of the rising nationalism and protectionist responses. And this sharpens the inequalities and polarization. So the author explains this into categories of four trends. The first being 2008 financial crisis, which showed a resilience of Asian economies. And as per the economic forecast, out of the G20 countries, only China and India are likely to register economic growth during this 2020. And most probably, the Asian states have shown greater responsiveness and more effective state capacity, that is, recovering faster than those in the West. The second trend is that the retreating of the US after a century of being a forefront leader in shaping the global order, like creation of United Nations and Bretton Woods institution after World War II. But the current situation under Trump's administration, the US is behaving as America's first attitude, which made to lose trust in US competence, and it had led to lose will and ability to lead. The third trend being European Union's internal challenges because of the expansion of membership to include East European states, and also the impact of some of the major financial crisis among the Eurozone members and the present ongoing Brexit negotiations. So the difficulties are prevailing to reach agreement on political matters, example in relation between China and Russia, and also the north-south divide within the Eurozones, where the hard and fast rule of measures which are imposed on Greece, Italy, Spain, and Portugal a decade ago by European central banks, which was persuaded by fiscally conservative Austria, Germany, and Netherlands. So, as the way forward, the author tells that the European Unions they need to look for the other rediscover in the patterns of limiting the free movement of goods, services, capital, and people. So the fourth trend being the US-China relationship, which had moved from the cooperation to competition and confrontation. So with trade and technology wars, there is also the problem of partial economic decoupling, and also BRI initiatives, Belt and Road initiatives by the China to Eurasia and Africa through both maritime and land routes shows the investment of trillions of dollars as a preemptive measures move against US attempts. So the present organizations of WHO, United Nations Security Council, are being subjected to big power politics, and they are nowhere seen in the current scenario. The United Nations Security Council, the G7 and G20 members who were structured and formed to coordinate a global response to the 2008 financial crisis, are now paralyzed. And presently, the World Health Organization are considered to be lost its autonomy over decades as their regular budgets shrank, forcing them to increasingly rely on voluntary contributions sourced largely from Western countries and foundations. US being the topmost lender, where the leadership strengthened the Bretton Woods institution in recent decades, where the World Bank spent around 250 percentage of whose budget on global health, because the US voting power gives it the blocking veto. So the major concern is that there is the absence of multilateral responses, highlighting the long felt need for reform of these bodies. But as per the author view, this cannot be happening without the collective global leadership. When we come to see on the energy factors, US being the leading major energy producer by for fundamentally altering the energy markets, aggravated internal tensions in West Asia, which are solely dependent on the oil reserves, and also the long-standing rivalries in region which often led to local conflicts, and beside from that had created a political instability in countries where the regime structures are fragile, which means they are weak. So there are the turbulent times which are lying ahead as per the author's view. So he says the rising nationalism and protectionist responses will prolong the economic recession into a depression, sharpening inequalities and polarization. The epidemic and ensuring safety in courts. This article, the author explains the provisions which are required to handle situations after the exit of the temporary lockdown. So, once the lockdown is lifted, the number of advocates and litigants is restricted in open court proceedings. So, there is a possibility of the virus being spread in high rates. So, invoking the Article 142, where the article gives a supreme power to the Supreme Court to do complete justice within the parties. So, it had issued on those basis for the functioning of courts through video conferencing during this period of lockdown. The National Informatics Center to associate with the respective high courts and formulate a plan on this virtual courts. But the present problem is that NIC has not yet notified the guidelines to the respective courts. The concerns are that the e-filing procedures involve a certain amount of technical knowledge and capability, where if we take an example of Delhi's High Court is far ahead in terms of technology when we compare it with the other high courts of the country. And also, if we consider the technical manpower in Delhi High Court, around 70 members and 70 count, and the district courts to be 30. In the Delhi High Court, e-filing is mandatory for company, taxation, and arbitration jurisdictions. So, what is required is that suitable safety measures must be put in place for conducting proceedings after the lift of lockdown. Facilities are available in Delhi High Court and Supreme Court, but it is deficit in other high courts and subordinate courts. So, unable to use the present technology in India, which is due to the lack of allocation of funds, sufficient funds to improve and strengthen the technical support for the judiciary, is the present scenario. And if we see of implementation guidelines which had been propounded on the basis where plans are to be formulated based on the availability of infrastructure to conduct virtual hearings or actual hearings. If in case the open court hearing is a must in the scenario, then the following guidelines have to be followed. Lawyers or litigants whose cases are listed for the day's hearing should be allowed to enter court halls. Only they are to be allowed inside. Lawyers must enter in batches according to the serial number in the list, and thermal image cameras must be installed in the entrance of every court buildings. And also ROK Setu app is a must to be installed in phones, and automatic hand wash faucet should be installed. Mask, gloves, and other sanitizers are a must. And also importantly, the junior lawyers needs to be provided with financial assistance, even in the form of a loan from nationalized banks or from the central government. Coming to terms, as per the statistical data from Health Ministry and the Indian Council of Medical Research, the country had already moved into the stage 3 of COVID-19 pandemic. But since the government had not acknowledged that, assuming the community spread had happened, this article wants centers and state to enforce virus containment measures. So on March 28, Health Ministry acknowledged that there was limited community transmission of the virus in India. In April 9th, ICMR and Health Ministry researchers in their journal paper provided evidence suggesting the prevalence of community transmission in 36 districts across 15 states. And on May 5th, total number of nationwide cases was close to 47,000, and the health minister said the India's virus spread had not gone to stage 3. So the major concern is that the government had not is extremely hesitant to admit the community transmission, and the nature of spread is through droplet transmission and contact with contaminated surfaces. The reason why being India is hesitant or refused to confirm the community spread early on could be the compulsion to expand testing when the country did not have the sufficient capacity to test the huge numbers each day. So the delay in testing due to the non-availability of a reliable rapid antibody test is posing a very big threat to the current prevailing situation. It takes 1 to 3 weeks for the antibodies to develop. The ELISA test now will miss people who have been recently infected. ELISA is nothing but called as the enzyme linked immunosorbent assay, which is used to detect the antibodies that the body develops in response to infection by SARS-CoV-2 novel coronavirus. So, collaboration with the states concerned will randomly test about 30,000 people in the general population in the way ahead. And as the way forward, we can say all states should continue with strict containment and mitigation measures, acting on the assumption that the virus had moved to the community spread stage. Responding to COVID 19 at the grassroots. This article explains about the functioning of the village level and gram level panchayats of the states of Kerala and Karnataka, which is taken as an example. So the article starts with the quotation made by Mahatma Gandhi and B.R. Ambedkar. Mahatma Gandhi envisioned that the free India would rest on a foundation of gram panchayats, village republics that governed locally and epitomized Swaraj in practice. But B.R. Ambedkar was doubtful. He described the caste-ridden, unequal village society as the cesspool. Yet he was not unequivocally against decentralization. So the locally relevant initiatives are the 73rd Constitutional Amendment Act mandates the constitution of panchayats at district level, intermediate and village levels as devolved institutions of self-governments. And this provides the endowment of powers to those institutions to plan and implement programs for social justice and economic development. Some states have donated grants to panchayats, but somehow abstracted by politicians and bureaucrats who fear the loss of their patronage powers. So the concern is that panchayats are not given enough funds and are bypassed by state-controlled line departments that continue to implement programs falling within the rightful domain of the former. So taken in an example where the states of Kerala and Karnataka, where the gram panchayat and village panchayats are being given sufficient grant in each for their implementation of programs. So if we consider Kerala, it empowers panchayat. 1/3 of Kerala's plant funds have been allocated to the panchayats for their flexible development and maintenance. If we take the example of Kudumbashree, where it has been able to effectively play as an incubator for women leaders who have then stepped in into political spheres. Around 65% of all women elected to the panchayats are from this Kudumbashree members. And also panchayat feeds the needy through their Astraya program and run free daycare centers for the mentally, physically challenged through birth school. So if we take Karnataka, panchayats made resolutions that no one in their prospective areas will go hungry. Is that their motto? And the panchayat level task force is meeting twice a week, and the primary health center doctors, auxiliary nurses, and the accredited social health care activities are the part of task force, and the elected representative and panchayat level staffs do participate in this event. So the decisions taken on COVID-19 related managements are implemented by the village level task force. The phase of exploitation. So here in this article, the author explains about the states which are relaxing their labor laws, which are appearing industry friendly. The center has done similar ways in which many circulars and clarification had been issued during this lockdown, but the worst affected are the migrant workers. So some of the steps taken by the government are considered to be a mere eyewash, where the 13 crore migrants with no way to return home and no money. State and center reminded quite about ensuring adequate relief to them or ways for them to return home. But the standard operation procedure issued permitted asymptomatic workers to return to their work sites where they were to reside, but not to their home stay. The reason being that the industries, once they lose the workers, will not be able to get them back as soon as the situation rebacks. So the center permitted only stranded workers to leave. Also said workers have to pay for their train tickets. So this seems to be a kind of violation of rights, stating the Article 23 of the Constitution, which prohibits forced labor. And while quoting the Supreme Court case in PUDR versus Union of India in 1982, where it held that the word force must be construed to include force arising from compulsion of economic circumstances, which leave no choice of alternative to a person in want and compels him to provide labor or service, even though the remuneration received for it is less than the minimum wage. It is to be noted in this time. And as per the International Labour Organization's Employment and Decent Work for Peace and Resilience recommendations of 2017 states that the state to ensure marginalized groups and freely choose employment while rebuilding after any disaster. So, but the workers are being treated as a resource to be exploited by industries and state without considering the two statements given by the Supreme Court and from the international labor organizations. So the way forward is that until we develop a plan that respects this invisible 13 crore workforce, there cannot be any real revival of India's economy or society. Thank you, friends, for watching. That's all from today's daily news analysis. The relevant fact check points had been added in the last page of the PDF. So give me a thumbs up if you like the video and subscribe to my channel.